They're creepy and they're kooky, mysterious and spooky. They're all together kooky, the Addams Family. Their house is a museum when people come to see them. They really are a scream, the Addams Family.
Time to play here. Everything you want to know about funerals, didn't know whom to ask in the arena. A lot of great information we're going to dispense. And a guy who's always full of it is Mike Schiller.
Good morning, Levittown.
All right. Levity Town, that's us.
Levity Town?
Yeah.
Good morning, Jim.
Hey, good to see you, Mike.
Very excited. This show that we're going to have today has been well planned out for over a month.
Oh, that's not unlike what we do.
No, normally
usually it's the other way around.
Our pants.
Yeah,
but,
we're gonna.
No, thanks to the kind folks at Nova, they provided us with Deirdre and Stephanie today, who are going to enlighten us on the topic of human trafficking.
Right, you see the PSAs and everything else that go on, Mike, and what it's all about. But you wonder, is there anybody going to be doing anything about it or attempting to do something about it?
There's quite a bit being done about it, and it's a good thing. So any questions people have, please feel free to call in, 215-949-3232. And with that, no further ado, I'd like to introduce Stephanie and Deirdre.
Okay, left to right on the radio, Stephanie and Deirdre? Okay,
Stephanie,
here.
yes, I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Deirdre. Thank you for having me.
And we're with Nova. But the thing about human trafficking, you said, what is it? How does it happen, and how do you stop it? Let's go with what it actually is.
Yeah. Well, January is National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month, So I am the Human Trafficking Advocate at Nova, and I'll let Deirdre introduce her role.
Okay.
Thanks, Stephanie. I'm Deirdre Blackburn, and I also work at Nova, and I'm the coordinator of our coalition. It's called the Bucks Coalition Against Trafficking.
Wow.
We call it BCAT for short, but that is a program of Nova, and Steph and I work together often.
Yeah, you see, you would probably see it along the coast. You see it like in Florida, maybe over the border, Texas, Arizona kind of stuff. It seems like it goes hand in hand with what's going on.
Absolutely. And I mean, and there's different kinds of human trafficking. Trafficking is a slavery, essentially, in the modern age. So the definition of human trafficking, it's a crime involving the exploitation of someone for the purpose of compelled labor or commercial sex acts through the use of fraud, force, or coercion. And those three are the biggest factors to distinguish what human trafficking is.
Right. And it's always somebody usually breaks away from some kind of cult or whatever and goes to the cops or somehow breaks away, and that's when you find out about it, when somebody actually has something that they overcome the situation.
Yeah, and I mean,
unfortunately.
They a lot do try, do attempt to flee, but there are many times that they don't, and they're in it for longer than, of course, what we would expect them to be.
Do you think it's underreported, the amount of it going on? You hear the stories, but it happens, but it can't be that bad. I mean, is it underreported?
It is an underreported crime, yes, and there's lots of reasons for that. I know Stephanie and I would love to kind of take people through, what human trafficking is and what it looks like in Bucks County. Mm-hmm. I wonder, Stephanie, do you want to talk a little bit about what Nova does?
Yeah.
And then we can explain to people what the coalition is doing, and we would love to give some really specific examples of what trafficking looks like and how people can help.
Okay.
Yeah. So Nova, it stands for the Network of Victim Assistance. We are a nonprofit organization that we started in 1974, in which we serve victims of crimes in Bucks County. We serve the Bucks County community by providing direct support to victims of sexual assault and other personal violations, and advancing the rights of victims through advocacy and prevention education programs. So we have a multitude of different programs that we provide at Nova. We have our advocacy department, we have our counseling department, our education department, we have a Bucks County crisis response team, we have our children's advocacy centers, and we have a whole lot. My department, I work in the advocacy department.
Sure.
We obviously provide accompaniment and support clients that are going through the criminal justice system, whether they're sexual assault victims of serious crimes, where we have the three specialties like mine of being the human trafficking.
It's like the awareness, we're running something here, it's you see something, say something.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's be a little more proactive. The more the voices you have, the better percentages you are that can expose it or remedy the situation.
And unfortunately, a lot of people are not saying something when they do see something.
Yeah.
So we definitely want to make that awareness more out there.
Do you interact with the authorities as well? Because that can, you're in the advocacy group. Do you have a relationship with authorities?
Yeah, we work very closely with a majority of the departments, well, all of them, but we have ones that see the human trafficking more than others. One particularly is the Ben Salem Police Department. You have that Route 13 that has a lot of the hotels. Unfortunately, that's where we see a lot of the sex trafficking coming out of. But we have a very good working relationship with them.
Seems like it goes hand in hand with the drug running as well. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, reading the news where some drug, whatever that was coming from Florida, and they ended up down in South Jersey around Malaga, going into the shore or headed to New York, and cops are out there all the time.
Right.
So they can figure it out, and that's good that they do.
Yeah, and I mean, they definitely were educating a lot of more of our smaller departments who may not be as familiar of knowing what's a victim, how to work with these victims.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, some law enforcement see these victims as prostitutes, and that's what we're trying to steer away from.
Is there a lot of casualties involved with this now? I mean, it gets pretty violent. It can.
I don't know what the statistics are in Bucks County. I have not heard of any myself, thankfully, but I'm sure it, unfortunately, is happening.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, asking about, working with law enforcement too, and Stephanie's right. We work closely with the local police departments throughout Bucks County, and one of the things that the coalition does, Bucks Coalition Against Trafficking, is our mission basically, to put it simply, is to eradicate human trafficking in Bucks County, and we do that through victim identification, community education, like what we're doing today, enhancements of arrests and prosecutions of offenders, legislative advocacy, and I really stress this, a real coordinated and multidisciplinary response to the needs of survivors of trafficking.
Right.
And one of the things that we work with is, we have various subcommittees, and picking up on what you said about law enforcement, we do have a law enforcement and prosecution subcommittee, and that's comprised of our district attorney in Bucks County. She's the head of the Human Trafficking Unit, Chelsea Jackman, who we work very closely with. Stephanie as an advocate, our coalition, she's a member of our coalition,
right,
as well as the police departments.
Right, and it would seem it could be geographically motivated too. We're in between two biggest cities on the East Coast, where people can hide. There's access, there's transportation, there's the corridor, Jersey, everything. It seems like this would be a hot spot for this kind of stuff. West Coast would be as well with L.A. It's probably not a coincidence. Miami, they're probably not a coincidence geographically. There's spots that are hotter than others. I can't imagine in Nebraska being, let's allow, but I could be wrong. I don't know.
And I think one of the things that, when we look at, human trafficking, and maybe Stephanie, if you want to talk about this, and I can too, but there's a lot of myths surrounding human trafficking, and that's not people's fault. It's just that we don't really know much about what really happens, and I know that
you find out after it's all over how bad it was.
Or like with our coalition, one of the things that we have to do in our community outreach committee is work to inform just the community as well as businesses and different partners in our coalition. By the way, our coalition is quite large. We're made up of not just NOVA, but partners from all over Bucks County, whether it's the district attorney's office, Drug and Alcohol Commission, and other addiction programs, children and youth services,
mental health,
behavioral health agencies, healthcare, because human trafficking really crossed the impact of human trafficking crosses so many areas of life. So many other partners need to be involved.
Has your force expanded since you started?
Our coalition itself?
Yes.
Sure. We were beginning our 6th year, so we formed in 2013, and we've accomplished a lot. We also have a victim focus subcommittee that Stephanie's very active on too, and that's really kind of what it sounds like. People from all over the county who provide services directly to victims and survivors come together to look at, okay, what are the services that are needed? What are the needs? What can we provide? What do we still need to work on? What are the areas missing? For example, housing. So Victim Focus works to, really look at the services out there and how we can make those better. We're always enhancing. Yeah. And I know that we have case reviews, too, where people come together with a specific situation and say, okay, what can we do together to help this person?
As far as both of you personally involved, is there a certain calling that got you where you are with this? Was there any incident or some family member, or just somehow you were drawn to it? How did you find your mission?
Sure. Thanks for asking. I've worked in victim services my whole life, and I've worked with NOVA for quite a few years. And for me, one of the things I've always learned is that with victimization, there's a lot of trauma that happens and a lot of
collateral damage too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And but there's also hope.
Sure.
And with human trafficking, I think that with education, with letting people know what's happening, there's a lot that we can do to meet that mission of if not eradicating human trafficking, doing our very best to let people know what they can do to help.
Stephanie, your story?
So I've worked in social work since I graduated, whether it's working with children, working with families. I worked child welfare for a long time. So it was when I was in child welfare is when we really started talking about sex trafficking, especially the commercial exploitation, sexual exploitation of children.
Involved, yeah.
Well, no, of children you don't need that. Yeah. And that's, I think, is very important to know that any minor who's under the age of 18 that's involved in any commercial sexual exploitation is automatically human trafficking. There does not need to be that fraud, force, or coercion.
Okay, I'm glad you cleared that part up.
Yeah.
I was confused in as much as, like Jim was saying, where we're located and all like that. Trafficking is being people who were taken from their homes, right off their homesteads, and put in a truck and transported to this area for sexual exploitation.
Which is one of the myths that many people
seriously, I'm a victim of that myth.
Absolutely. And, a lot of people think of that movie Taken with Liam Neeson, I think it's
Neeson.
Right. Yeah. Yep. That, it's only happening abroad, that they're being kidnapped, that they're being snatched. But really these traffickers, it's happening right here, whether it's family members, it can be strangers, someone that they know, but they know to find the vulnerable people. It's like a psychological game that they play with them.
Sure.
We'll take care of you.
And they network. They network just like anybody else.
Absolutely.
And try to break through that.
Yeah. So it's really scary what they do. They're tricking, they're defrauding, they're manipulating. Essentially, they have we call it grooming, is what they're doing. And some of the basic stages that we're seeing, they're targeting the victim. They're finding who is the most vulnerable person to bring in. Minors, runaway minors, ones that are homeless.
No options,
right.
No money.
Absolutely. You see unfortunately, the drug addictions with this opioid epidemic that's happening. They're holding those drugs over men, women, and children to lure them in. Oh, I'll buy your drugs for you, but you're going to do this for me in return, whether it's the sex trafficking.
Well, we're going to be talking about that and a lot more. We're just getting warmed up here on WBCB.
Everything you wanted to know about funerals and planning, but did not know who to ask. Tune in on Mondays at 9 a.m. to the Galzerano Funeral Home. More than just a funeral home, Louis A. Galzerano III has been serving Bucks County for over 100 years. Family owned and operated by Louis and his wife, Carol. Galzerano Funeral Home serves all faiths and nationalities. A full-service funeral home with a full line of cremation options and a crematory on the premises. 2 locations to serve you and your family, one in Bristol and one in Levittown. Call 215-788-2821 or 215-945-8484. Special rates to show our thanks to all servicemen and women as well as the FOP. Galzerano Funeral Home, 215-788-2821 or 215-945-8484.
The life of a Philly sports fan is a wild ride. Some years we triumph, some years we trust. What never changes year after year is how we get to the game, shoulder to shoulder with our fellow fans on SEPTA. On the way to the tailgate, the tip-off, face-off, or first pitch, the Broad Street line takes us from our homes to our home fields and back again. Yeah, the life of a Philly sports fan is a wild ride, but win or lose, we ride together. Get your ride started at iseptaphilly.com.
Everything you wanted to know about.
And we're rolling along here for a Monday. Everything you want to know about funerals, didn't know whom to ask. Galzarano Funeral Home and Mike Schiller at the helm. And you had an interesting story too, Mike. You're you're with the Nova victims of that and would be buried at times, and there's death.
Well, that's how I became familiar with Nova.
Yeah.
If there's a family who's had a loss, and the loss is due to a crime, where their loved one was a victim, Nova is able to file the paperwork with the state to attach some funds to help pay for the funeral, if not the whole thing.
Right. Oh, so I didn't know your connection. That's
how I found out about Nova. And when I seen them at different functions, I would always go over to their booth. Yeah. And I went over this time and talked to the people at the booth, and they said, they gave me Angela's number. Mm-hmm. I called her, and she put Stephanie and Deirdre together to have this show today.
Right. And we were talking about it's underreported. There's a subculture of it, and it's also a children at risk, exploitation, but it's also a profit in there too, right? There's a profit motive that
absolutely.
Would you say so? That also people doing it, they're getting paid pretty well to do it.
This is a multi-million dollar business. Multi-millions.
Wow.
Millions.
Wow.
And to tack onto what Stephanie just said, it's the second most profitable criminal industry worldwide. Yeah. Second most profitable criminal industry.
Second.
So the only one ahead of that, if you might be able to guess, would be drugs.
Yes.
Exactly. Would be drugs.
Yep.
And
they go hand in hand.
Thank you. I was just about to say they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
They do.
That's right.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of myths surrounding that too. We were talking about that at the break a little bit, how, sometimes what we think of trafficking, it's not that it's wrong to think that it happens in other countries or that people are brought over from other countries. That does happen. But what people don't realize as much is it also happens right here in our country, in every state, in every county, and in many towns. And that's sort of that is the thing that really surprises people. Stephanie was talking earlier about, the areas. There's certain areas in Bucks County, in New Jersey as well. I know some of our listeners are Jersey. And there are a lot of hotels. And if you think about, I don't know the number, but we know that there's a lot. And if you think about the number of hotels, you put that together with the fact that a lot of trafficking occurs, they bring their victims and therefore the buyers to hotels. And I know our district attorney, when he was speaking to our coalition one time, asserted that, trafficking is indeed happening every single day in Bucks County. And so that's a really sobering thing to know. And it's something that, as you mentioned earlier, a lot of people are really surprised to learn.
Sure.
Yeah. The closest thing I ever came to is living in a neighborhood in Pennsauken, and the house was for sale, and all of a sudden there's like 8 people in there. And all of a sudden they're coming and going at all times of the night. And I, being a disc jockey, was working overnights a lot. Come home and the place would always be lit up. And finally, it got curiosity peaked in the neighborhood. What the heck is going on there? And pretty soon, find out that they're running drugs and everything else through this thing, and they shut it down.
Well, and that's one of the indicators that you just mentioned about the late night activity at odd hours, long hours.
Yeah.
That's one of the indicators, with recognizing human traffic, any kind of trafficking, whether it's labor or sex trafficking.
Right. Yeah. And they are they're kind of intermingled. And do they network just like anybody else would? I mean, with all social media and stuff and codes and all the other. I mean, there's a million ways to communicate this stuff, and the bad guys out there, right?
There are, absolutely.
Yeah. And you're monitoring that, right?
Can you?
Traffickers,
they're good at what they do. They are, many of them, masters at being able to recognize a vulnerability of a person, zero in on that, and exploit that. And what I mean by that is, let's take, for example, children, youth, minors. And if you think about, who is at risk for trafficking, think about kids for a moment. And then think about this question. Is that youth walking to school or stores alone each day? Do they have access to a computer? Do they like to go on social media? Do they have a desire for a romantic relationship? Do they fight with their parents? Do they want more independence? And when you look at those questions, the answer to who is vulnerable are all kids, right?
Yeah,
but
definitely.
You look at that and say, okay, just by being the age that you are, developmentally, yes, you are vulnerable. That could be something that could predispose you to a predator or trafficker. I use those words interchangeably, predator and trafficker, to looking at that child and saying, I'm going to target that about you. I'm going to target that vulnerability. But here's the thing. We also know that there are kids who have increased vulnerability too. One of the things we haven't talked about yet, but which is a really important factor when it comes to who is vulnerable, is you can look at, does a child have a prior history of sexual abuse? That can be a large vulnerability. You think about the things that happen as a result of that. That child, because if they've already been abused, that trafficker, put it this way, there's no better target for that trafficker, because a lot of the grooming that Stephanie mentioned earlier has already been done for them. They are already, that father, that stepfather, that uncle, whomever it is, has already groomed that child for confusing love with sex and abuse. They've groomed that child for guilt and shame. They've groomed that child already for seeking love and thinking they need to get it. Yeah. Through the ways that we just mentioned.
And the next level is somebody tries to break away, and then that's when the violence happens, and that's when the fatalities are there. That seems like somebody's had enough or wants to get out. Yeah, and then you put that together with maybe they're running drugs as mules and all the other stuff too. There's got to be a parallel for that as well. It's almost like a double jeopardy, really, isn't it?
In terms of drugs?
Yes.
Sure. Do you want to speak to that, Stephanie? Or?
About the drugs?
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said before, this heroin opioid epidemic is really bad.
Right.
And, the traffickers know to target these women with the mental health, the drug and alcohol. They lure them in saying, all right, I'm going to buy your drugs for you, but you're going to do this for me. You're going to sell yourself. And they will hold them until they're that dope sick, until they're to that point of doing all that, and then they'll give them the drugs. But they're getting that money back from them, doing the sex acts and the payments, and and they're not seeing the money. So it's not like they can take these victims can't take that money and go buy their own drugs. They're depending on these traffickers to give them those drugs so they don't continue that dope sickness. And it's really sad that they take advantage of that vulnerability for that.
And I think that's one of the needs when we look at what kind of services do victims and survivors of trafficking need, because of the use that drugs as a weapon for controlling. That person is going to need some help with drug and alcohol treatment. Yeah. And that's a service that is much needed for people who are looking to get out of the life or who are have been discovered and in need of help.
Part of the thing is that some of these are shielded behind what look like legitimate businesses. So like a daycare center, nobody's checking on anybody, and all of a sudden they're running in and out of there with kids and everything, and they're right in the middle of a neighborhood where it's right under your very nose, and you don't really. I guess we're not as suspicious maybe as we should be.
No, because these businesses look legitimate, like the spas and the grocery stores, even the hotels. I mean, that's where you're going to see the labor trafficking coming into place. Obviously, the massage parlors and the nail salons, that's where you're going to see the sex trafficking. But you look at a storefront, no idea what's happening behind those doors.
No, and it looks perfectly innocent. It's residential, everybody's doing their own thing underneath everything else, and that's kind of want to keep it low key. It's never very flamboyant. It's really kind of a hidden operation.
Sure it is, and I think that's one of the things. I mean, trafficking is a hidden crime. And the other thing about trafficking, you talk about the drugs, and it's like, if you think about it, if you're a drug dealer, you sell a drug one time and then that's gone, right?
Yeah.
But when you sell a person, the people are commodities in trafficking. You sell that individual, you can sell that person over and over and over again. It never has to stop unless there's something that finally ends it.
Yeah.
So, it's a high profit, low risk industry. As you said, because it exists often behind closed doors in a way that most people, unless they know what to look for, and that's one of the reasons why we're here today, is to let people know, yes, this happens, and what are those, red flags, if you will. What can you look for? And then what can we do?
Yeah, you're one of your myths is, oh yeah, that happens elsewhere. That didn't happen here. And I live in Cherry Hill, and all of a sudden, after 9/11, they had a couple of kids in local high school. All of a sudden, they found out they were working for the Taliban and illegal, and a guy was developing pictures, and they showed him shooting guns, and that led to their arrest. They were trying to invade Fort Dix.
Wow!
And it turned out to be they all went to jail, but it was right in our neighborhood, 3 blocks away, and that's when everybody.
Yeah.
Hey, maybe you need the
Scary.
you get the wake up call, and that's probably what happens more than not, right, Deirdre? Somebody gets a wake up call, and somebody's on alert, but that's actually a good thing in the long run.
Right. I mean, the first step to making
Shocking,
any change, shocking.
Yeah.
And the first step to making any sort of change is an awareness that something needs to change.
Yeah.
And without that education, without people knowing, whether it's people living in a community, whether it's businesses, people working regular jobs anywhere, without understanding what to look for, we would not see it. Or as you say, something all of a sudden hits the news.
Yeah.
And then it raises everybody's awareness. But the thing is, it's interesting. January is National Human Trafficking Month. And so a lot of efforts happen during January to bring that awareness about. And that's really important. At the same time, we have to have that awareness every day of every month.
Well, there was just a local incident that I heard of just through word of mouth. I didn't see anything on the news about it per se. Is that because it's not able to be broadcasted until such time as it's confirmed or
you don't have all the
accused?
facts, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're not seeing a lot of the national of the big time picking it up. I mean, are you talking about the Chinese restaurant where there was a labor trafficking?
I don't want to pick on them.
No, we won't say who it is, but
right.
There was a restaurant that it was discovered that there was labor trafficking going on. I saw it on a lot of the local media, like on Facebook and whatnot. But you're right, it wasn't on like
there was a lot of devastated
ABC
people.
News. There was
some crazy housewives. Like, what are we going to do for dinner now?
Yeah, and that's the one thing also with traffickers is that a lot of the traffickers, they're not doing the recruitment themselves. They have people who they're sending out to recruit for them, to bring them in, whether it's women. I mean, if you can have another woman talking to another woman, convincing her, let's say, I have a Bible study, why don't you come join? And there's no Bible study, and with the children, they're actually sending in other children who unfortunately have already been pulled into it to recruit other children, going into the schools, going on the social media. It's very scary.
So when you mention labor, so it's more than just sexual, it's also a labor pool of people that work for far less than minimum wage or whatever. They're happy with housing and food.
Right. And, with the labor trafficking, we are going to see, it is a lot more foreigners that are involved in the labor trafficking. I mean, they're coming from other countries in, that they're either getting a better education or they're talked about what this job is going to be. It's supposed to be really great. They can go to school, they'll have a great place to live, and then they get here, and that's not the case. They're working long hours. Their living conditions are horrible. There is no school. There is barely any money coming in, which they were counting on to either send back to their families, and it's hard for them to be able to get out because then they're getting threatened with deportation, nowhere else to go because they have no family here. Yeah. So they get stuck.
Well, I've talked to some people who are in construction, landscaping, things like that. And, they tell me, I'm from Costa Rica. I said, I've been to Costa Rica. Why would anyone ever want to leave there? They said, because there's no work.
Right.
Wow.
And, you know, if you can't get hired by a local hotel or something, or resort,
Yeah.
Work for Nova. There you
Yeah,
go.
right.
Stephanie and Deirdre, part of the Nova Network. We're coming right back here on WBCB.
Everything you wanted to know about funerals and planning but did not know who to ask. Tune in on Mondays at 9 a.m. to the Galzerano Funeral Home. More than just a funeral home, Louis A. Galzerano III has been serving Bucks County for over 100 years. Family owned and operated by Louis and his wife Carol. Galzerano Funeral Home serves all faiths and nationalities. A full-service funeral home with a full line of cremation options and a crematory on the premises. 2 locations to serve you and your family, one in Bristol and one in Levittown. Call 215-788-2821 or 215-945-8484. Special rates to show our thanks to all servicemen and women as well as the FOP. Galzerano Funeral Home, 215-788-2821 or 215-945-8484.
I'm Westbrook here to tell you about my good friends over at Golden Nugget Jewelers. Just because I used to leave it all in the field doesn't mean you have to leave all your money at the register to get her that special engagement ring. Head on over to Golden Nugget Showroom on the corner of 8th and Chestnut to get treated like a Hall of Famer. They've got the best selection of loose diamonds, the best prices, and lifetime guarantees. But what really sets Golden Nugget apart is the family-owned, friendly atmosphere. Golden Nugget Jewelers. It's where Philly gets engaged.
Everything you want to know about funerals, didn't know whom to ask. Yes, and we're with Stephanie and Deirdre, sort of the Thelma and Louise, probably,
Oh my
of
gosh.
Nova, right?
We are so the Thelma and Louise of human trafficking.
You have just given people something to call us.
Anyway, but at the same time, there's so many different facets as we continue our chat here. One of the things I can remember is in schools. I don't know, do you go into schools at all? Because every once in a while, as a parent, I would get a memo from home, strange car in neighborhood.
Yes.
Or I see this kid, I see these kids walk in the neighborhood, but they're not in our school. Why aren't they? Those are the kind of things that have been happening a little bit,
Right.
at least, and that's a good thing. Maybe, and hopefully there's more of it as you get a note from, we better be a little more octune on what's going on. Do you hear
Absolutely.
stories about those too?
I do. I mean,
Yeah.
I have a son who's in elementary schools, and
Yeah.
seeing those kind of messages get sent home
Sure.
are pretty scary to see it. But
Yeah, but that's the good part of the education and
It
awareness events that you're talking about. They're trying to get the message out. Yeah, that you're in that communication business, and the more people you can reach, the more avenues you have,
yeah.
certainly increases the percentages of stopping it in its tracks.
It is, and the kids talk about the kids in school. I've noticed I've had a lot of conversations with either social workers, guidance counselors
Sure.
in these schools, where these kids trust these people, with whatever is happening. And so we have gotten referrals and phone calls from these social workers and guidance counselors saying, even just asking like, hey, this kid told me, this was happening to them. Is this like a red flag that this could be possible trafficking that's happening?
Yeah.
So I'm glad that they're reaching out to even asking,
Yeah.
could this indicator
Sure.
be human trafficking? And I absolutely, if there's any concern for any minor, you call Childline,
Yeah.
which is our, state, child abuse registry, because children and youth, then once they have a referral or a case, they will send a referral to me for me to complete an assessment on a child for who might be a concern that there could be that, commercial sexual exploitation of a child. So I can determine whether or not that child may already be
Sure.
trafficked, or what they can do. Like they're such a high risk that they're almost there, and what recommendations that we can give to help
Right.
prevent
A lot of
it.
abuse in the business?
Yes.
And
Okay.
one of the things I was thinking of while you were talking, Stephanie, is, in talking about kids in schools, so often it's kids' peers who notice things first. Mm-hmm. So let's say you have a youth or a young girl, teen, and suddenly she has this older boyfriend, this guy who has appeared on the scene. He doesn't go to school there, perhaps, and she's being picked up, maybe, not right on campus, but a little ways down the road. Maybe she's got some new clothes, or
She's
nails.
also very tired. She's falling asleep in class. her attendance
Falls
has diminished, is falling off. Those are all indicators that something is happening.
And it doesn't mean it's definitely trafficking.
Right.
We don't want to say, okay, because this indicator is present, this person is being trafficked. But if you look at maybe things all put together, our antenna should be up. And when you think about if kids notice this first, and then also teachers, what can we do as parents? Well, we need to know who our kids' friends are. We need to know, what they're doing, what online avenues are they using, programs, are they in chat rooms? Sometimes we need to pry more than maybe we're comfortable doing. And I know it's a fine line, but it's also a way to determine what is happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a lot tougher too because we're not as tech savvy as our kids, and they can hide a lot of stuff. And
we need to be able to play.
It was the same way years ago. I had parties at my house at least 2 weeks out of 4. Not parties, gatherings of children. And when they got bigger and the pool went in, it was nothing for me to get up at 2 a.m. and look at the lights down low, but see the pool lights reflecting on people with guitars and stuff like that. And I had some stringent rules as far as what was and was not appropriate.
Nothing but Frank
Sinatra
playing, right?
But even as far as like dropping your kids off, families feel or parents feel it's okay just to drop them off. Well, even if you've met the parents of the kids, go in the house, see what the setting is, see how receptive, if the parents are there to receive your child. Don't just let a kid out of the car, go into a house, and you have no clue what's going on in there.
Right.
And I'm telling you, I used to drop my boys off, and I was surprised. I was surprised.
Yeah, I have play dates now because you didn't know about
people who I knew to say hello to on the soccer fields and stuff like that, but when I went into their house and they knew we were coming, and where the parents were was not where I expected.
Right. Sure. And we used to go to playgrounds, and I used to
turn down the audio a little.
I used to be in the car.
I wouldn't have been as upset.
Yeah, well, years ago we could go to the playgrounds and play ball, do whatever we want. Can't do that anymore.
No.
When my kids were young, I was always either in the car or on the playground with them. That's just the way it goes.
I never had a daughter, and to this day, little girls melt my heart. I'm not allowed to express myself per Broomhilda that I'm married to. That's that woman's daughter. Leave her alone. She knows how cute she is.
Right.
And, when they smile back at you, it's like, and you feel like a dirty old man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, parents definitely a lot of vigilance. Like, we take our kids to the store, and they have a toy section. We used to be like, if you want to go play over in the toy section, go right ahead.
Yeah.
It's like you can't leave your children alone because there are these predators who are now going out to Walmart, Target. They're looking who's there. They're looking who their next victim's going to be.
And if the mother or father are worth their salt, they will say, don't talk to other people.
Right.
Danger, stranger.
Right.
Stranger, danger.
Right.
And I see that in the kids because they'll pull away. And
you also find some things, too, like a clue here and there. Treatment at emergency rooms, urgent care, somehow.
Oh, they give them the third degree.
The details are, let's say, a little sketchy, and maybe so we would get some of the people working there that.
Yeah.
No, this doesn't. We're not going to collect that. We know we're not going to collect on that bill.
Big indicator at those hospitals and urgent cares is they're not. Those traffickers are not allowing those women to go by themselves. They're going to have someone there with them.
Yeah.
They're going to be the person talking for that victim. That victim's not going to be saying anything because that trafficker doesn't want that victim.
So they have it that fine-tuned.
So that's one of the indicators is that they're not able to talk for themselves. That they're going to have someone talking for them. They might not even know where they are, the town that they're in, especially if they're not from the area. So when you start talking, where you're from, what's your home address, and they're like,
I learned that.
I don't know.
I learned that.
There.
I learned one of those in a visit to their urgent care, getting patched up. And so that's part of now their continuing education programs.
Yeah.
Just doing that. So in that way, that's a bonus for what you, Deirdre, are doing is everybody's a little more watchful now or
Absolutely.
in tune now.
as part of our coalition, we certainly have healthcare people from the healthcare industry as partners. And there's been trainings done to various people, working in emergency rooms, in hospitals, in doctors' offices, about what to look for, what are those signs, and then how to handle it. Because you don't want to confront the person because you could actually putting them in danger. Yeah. Ideally, if you can separate them and have a private conversation so that that person who you're concerned about might be more comfortable talking.
Yeah.
Like an example of that separating, you need to go take them for an x-ray. They might not need an x-ray, but you're separating them away from that person where the trafficker can't go with them to that space.
Emergency contact number, address. Some of the stuff you would normally get looks a little, send the bill where. That gets the spidey senses going, as they say, right?
And that's what we're continuing to educate, because I can't tell you how many nurses who I've talked to that are like, oh my God, I have so come across people and I didn't know. So, it's great that we can get that education out there so that they are knowing what they're looking for. No
question about that.
Funeral directors are required to take continuing ed courses. Yeah. And it's recently imposed, past 2 licensing periods, where we have to take at least 2 hours on child abuse.
Yeah.
So you would think in a normal setting, funeral director meeting with the elders of the family, when will we be dealing with children? That type of thing. But when you take the course, you find out why you're required to take that course. Yeah. And it's rather morbid and sad.
It is.
But
and it looks sometimes rather innocent, and you don't really notice anything. But that's the game, how they play it.
Yeah,
and between the coroner and ourselves, we have to report to the authorities what we found.
Do you have certain case let's say a case where certain scenarios it seems like that would be one to watch? Or, sir, this is a sort of like a checklist of
take you through something.
Yeah, so this is the one where you should be a little suspicious. Maybe ask a question or two.
Kind of. So do you want me to read kind of a case scenario like a story of what happened?
Yep.
And all right.
And then we'll talk about an event after we come back from break.
Absolutely. Sure. So I actually got this story because, with mine, as much as I would love to share my clients that I work with, confidentiality. So I did go on, there is a national human trafficking site, it's called Polaris, and they actually have case stories of scenarios that have happened. So I'll read one of those that gives an example. So Sarah is a 17-year-old Caucasian female who ran away from home a few times because she didn't get along with her mother and her stepfather and was considered a problem child at home. She ran away to different states and didn't know the area she was in. She was walking to the store alone, and a 30-year-old male drove up beside her and told her how pretty she was and asked her why she looked so sad. Sarah told him that she was angry with her mom and just needed to take a walk. He asked her if he could get her nails done and down the street to cheer her up, and she agreed. He paid right away while giving compliments and telling her he wanted to meet her the next day. For the next several months, he picked up Sarah, took her to get her nails done, had her move in with him. She thought that was her boyfriend. They spent a lot of time together, and after living together for a while, he would tell her that he couldn't make the rent payments anymore. He asked her to go on dates with older men and engage in commercial sex. Sarah felt uncomfortable but agreed because she didn't have any way to return home and wanted to make him happy. Until one night when she was on the street, she was raped by a stranger who initially solicited her for sex. She was able to call for police and was taken to the hospital for an exam. So one thing that happens when these victims...
slope kind of thing.
Absolutely. Yep. So this guy built that trust with her. I love you. I'm going to do all these things for you.
Nobody ever cared before.
Right.
Yeah.
You're beautiful. Yeah. I'll take care of you, baby.
Yeah.
Oh, but I can't pay the rent. And if you're living with me, you're going to have to help me pay for it. So I'm going to set up these dates for you. And they know that they don't want to do it, but they trust this person. They love this person.
What other option do I have?
I have nowhere else to go,
Yeah.
So she was very fortunate that she was able to call for police and they took her to the hospital. So one thing with that is when they get to the hospital, that's something at Nova that we do. We actually do the sexual assault forensic examinations. That's where police are calling us. So that's where I would get involved. That's where our SANE nurses get involved. So now I can start getting her to a safe place, whether if it's a residential program, which we have human trafficking residential residential programs that are just for victims of human trafficking to keep them safe.
All right, Stephanie and Deirdre are here from Nova. We talk about an upcoming event when we come right back.
Everything you wanted to know about funerals and planning but did not know who to ask. Tune in on Mondays at 9 a.m. to the Galzarano Funeral Home. More than just a funeral home, Louis A. Galzarano III has been serving Bucks County for over 100 years. Family owned and operated by Louis and his wife Carol. Galzarano Funeral Home serves all faiths and nationalities. A full-service funeral home with a full line of cremation options and a crematory on the premises. 2 locations to serve you and your family, one in Bristol and one in Levittown. Call 215-788-2821 or 215-945-8484. Special rates to show our thanks to all servicemen and women as well as the FOP. Galzarano Funeral Home. 215-788-2821 or 215-945-8484.
Ventresca Limited, the Delaware Valley's men's store, is located in historic Doylestown. For casual clothing and denim to business suits and tuxedos, Ventresca Limited has a large selection you have to see to believe. The experienced and knowledgeable sales staff can show you the many brand labels that have made Ventresca Limited in Doylestown a must for men concerned about their image. Select from Hugo Boss, Hickey Freeman, John Varvatos, Alan Edmonds, and much more. Custom alterations are free. Visit Ventresca Limited on the web at ventresca.com.
Our final segment here on WBCB, this edition, everything you want to know.
I think we need a 2-hour show today.
2 hours, huh?
I
There's
do.
a lot.
These girls are coming back.
That's right. Deirdre and Stephanie are here, and a lot of great information. And now we got an
I just have a real quick question before we go into another topic. A lot of things are unavoidable in households. I realize that. But how liable or how chargeable are the parents of these youths that once they, this has happened in their house? Does it go beyond the youth as far as looking into the parental guidance or lack thereof?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, some of these minors that are being trafficked are actually being trafficked by their parents.
Really?
So again, this is going back to the opioid epidemic. These parents who either
their own opioids?
They need to buy their own drugs or they have no means, they're selling their children to get the money for drugs. So
Mommy not so dearest.
Mommy not so dearest, correct. Or daddy not so dearest. So there are parents who absolutely have no idea that this happened. I think they have suspicions, especially when you have the runaway youth. But when it comes to trafficking, they may have no idea. But some of these parents are using their kids. They are the traffickers to these children.
Now, when they get charged, is it strictly for their drug use, or can they get charged for trafficking?
They can get charged for human trafficking, which is a felony 1 charge.
Good.
Yeah.
Are judges pretty much up to the speed on this too, Steph? I mean,
in Bucks County, I know in Bucks County they are.
As far as sentencing and
yes,
they're
I know. Obviously, we're still working more to get the traffickers and the buyers.
Yeah.
A biggest part is the buyers, because the buyers are what keeps this industry going.
Yeah.
If we can get rid of the buyers, this industry would go away.
If they end up in front of Judge Rubenstein, they'll get whacked pretty good. Alan Rubenstein used to be a former prosecutor here. Yeah. So you have an event that you want to promote a little bit.
I would love to, but before that, I want to pick up on what the 3 of you were just saying about the buyers. We call it demand, and Stephanie's absolutely right. I mentioned in the beginning that this is $1 billion industry, and it's because the buyers make it so.
Yeah.
And if we were to eliminate demand, then it would no longer be profitable. And what I want to bring up is there's some new legislation up called the Trafficking Buyer Beware Act, and it's a joint piece of legislation in the House and the Senate. And basically, it's to increase penalties on criminal convictions of certain human trafficking offenses. And one of those offenses is to increase penalties for buyers, because currently, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a misdemeanor.
You know what? Actually, because I have not
seen
enough buyers being charged.
It's basically a fine. We need to hold accountable the buyers. Yeah. We need to make it so that it is not risk-free to to purchase a person for sex. And really, until that happens, and until we can change that, sex trafficking particularly will remain a profitable and, as I said, low risk thing to do. So it's one of the things that I think that we all need to be thinking about. Who are the buyers? White males with the means to buy. That means they're the people who are working every day. That means they're the people in our community. That means there are people who have families as well. Am I saying all men buy sex? No, I'm not. Most men don't. But the ones who do are fueling this industry.
Yeah, it's not just inner cities. That's suburbia.
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Absolutely everywhere.
Wow. All right, you have your big event.
Yes, thank you so much. Kind of right on the heels of the importance of letting people know about this issue. Our coalition has what we call kind of a signature event every other year during National Human Trafficking and Awareness Month. And this Friday, January 18th, we are co-hosting along with Chimayo Gallery and Gift Shop in Percy, Pennsylvania, an awareness-raising educational evening as well as a fundraising evening. And we're calling it Bucks for Freedom. And you can come. It's free admission. We welcome all members of the community to come to Chimayo between 4 and 8. It's sort of an open house style. Come in and you will get information. You can walk up to Stephanie, who's going to be at a station, and have a one-on-one conversation with the now famous Stephanie Shantz-Stiver about human trafficking.
You want answers? You can't handle the truth.
Yes, some people can, unfortunately, in this field.
We'll have another member of our coalition who works exclusively with youth on the street, homeless youth, and he'll be there to talk about that and what that connection to trafficking. We also have a silent auction with a lot of wonderful items, including original artwork, dining out auction items, all kinds of interesting things, as well as some activities for kids and henna, if anyone's interested in getting some henna done. But the purpose is to come together to hear about the issues, what we can do, also enjoy some appetizers and a wine bar. So I want to encourage anyone who is interested to come and join us on Friday evening.
One question I neglected, you talked about legislation. Have you talked to Congressman or Fitzpatrick or State Senator Tommy Tomlinson? Have you had meetings with the elected officials?
They're very supportive of human trafficking legislation.
You tell a lot of told them the same stories, yeah.
Absolutely. We've had very good conversations, and Safe Harbor Act recently passed.
Yeah. Okay.
And the Safe Harbor Act is really about protecting, not prosecuting child victims. And this was passed and went into effect on December 23rd of 2018. But it really amends the trafficking statute to ensure that child victims of sex trafficking receive the protective responses that they need.
And encourage others.
Yes, and it's called Act 130, and it provides immunity and diversion alternatives for sexually exploited children. So if a child cannot be charged with prostitution, which is like you can never call a child a prostitute. The child is not a prostituted person. Yes. And so it defines what it means to be a sexually exploited child and makes sure that no charges occur, but that there are things put in place to provide alternatives and assistance.
Mike, have you ever had to report back to some of the experience you had, like you said, in funeral business, and then talk to Nova? Would you probably do that now, though, right?
Well,
you would refer that, right?
Victims of crime, I've talked to Nova.
Yes.
And someone's been in a murder or vehicular.
Yeah.
Someone drunk driver or whatever. But no, not for any children per se.
Yeah.
But like I said, the continuing ed course taught me things what to look for that I never knew to look for.
Because you've been doing this for some 40-some years.
I'm not a big advocate of continuing ed, but in this particular case,
it worked
if
for you.
If it's something different or out of the norm, it should be taught.
Or you probably never thought of it. That's the thing.
Never in a million years, because it wasn't too long ago I had to take care of a 2-year-old who the grandparents couldn't have been sweeter, nicer people. But in the meantime, the mother of the 2-year-old was being held for charges.
Are there open recruitment for people who like to be a part of the team?
Thank you. I'm happy you asked that. There are ways for people to get involved. So if you're in Bucks County, you can certainly contact me at NOVA and hear about the coalition and ways you might want to get involved, be a coalition partner if you'd like. If you are, I know some of your listeners are New Jersey, New Jersey has a statewide anti-trafficking coalition as well as a program called Dream Catchers, I believe, Stephanie. Yep. And that they provide direct services, I understand, to trafficking.
They have staff members for each of the counties, but it's one large organization called Dream Catchers.
And another way, and this was mentioned earlier, let's say, if you've listened today, you've learned what the signs are of trafficking, and you can continue that by contacting BCAT to learn more. Or you can go on Polaris.org, PolarisProject.org that Stephanie was talking about. You can go to NOVA's website and learn more about trafficking. And also, if you were to see something, or if you yourself are in a situation where you need help, there is a national human trafficking hotline, and I want to give that number. It's 1-888-373-7888, or you can text the word "Be Free." So "Be Free" is 233-733. And I think that we all have a duty to pay attention. And if you ever feel the need to call, you mentioned that house or a business that at one point
right in the neighborhood.
Say something.
Yeah, the see something, say something can be applied here.
Very innocent looking, right in the middle of a community. Everybody's just doing their own thing. That's probably where they are.
You can report that. You do not need to give your name if you don't want to. It's providing information. The Human Trafficking Hotline will take it, give it a case number, and then they will contact the proper local authorities. So the more information you have when you call is helpful.
Right.
And then they take it from there.
And don't think anything you're reporting is insignificant. This might be nothing, but you never know.
Absolutely.
It could start out, and all of a sudden, somebody else has a tip. Somebody else is working on that.
Right.
And it's a good thing.
Before we're getting near the end, believe it or not, it's unbelievable how fast that hour went by. It did, didn't it? Could you girls enlighten our listeners as to NOVA and what NOVA is and how it came about? And is it a state-funded? Is it a contribution or...
So we are a nonprofit organization,
okay.
Which we began in 1974. We do the legal advocacy, which I know you've talked to a couple of our advocates of helping with those victim compensations. We have our counseling department, which offers free short-term one-on-one trauma counseling, which is so important because how many people don't also have insurance or whatnot.
Right.
We have our education department that goes out to schools, the public, to talk about sexual abuse and all of that with children's. We have our child advocacy center that does our forensic interviews. That's a multidisciplinary team in addressing the sex abuse and make referrals. And then we have our Bucks County crisis response team.
Terrific.
So we could put NOVA down as instead of flowers or whatever. People want to contribute, we could put your
certainly designate NOVA
designation,
we would much appreciate
and they would
that. Network of Victim Assistance.
So that's what I wanted to clear up.
Hope you get you back.
Definitely. I think they're coming back in about a month.
That's right.
Well, not the girls.
Yes, thank you very much for having us.
That's
right. Pleasure. Thank you for coming out.
Everything you want to know about funerals, didn't know whom to ask. Gals Around a Funeral Home and Mike Schiller.
When he's awake.
When he's awake, here on BCB.
Sweet. Bitchy. So get a witch's all